And we are back. The book, The Uncommon Life of Danny O'Connell, invites readers to explore the journey of a player that was dismissed as merely common in the world of baseball card collecting. Yet, as we discover, Danny O'Connell's life is a rich tapestry woven with dreams, disappointments, and the unrecognized grandeur of an ordinary existence. Joining me now is the author of The Uncommon Life of Danny O'Connell, Steve Wiegand. And thank you, Steve, for being with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so Steve, let me ask you, when somebody asks who is Danny O'Connell, not a household name, but you find him to be one.
Well, yeah, he's certainly not a household name. And I guess the quick answer is he was a baseball card. He was a baseball player whose baseball card I kept getting when I was a kid. What attracted me to him was that even though he was considered a common player as a player, he was by no means average. And I'll give you a quick example because, as you know, baseball is about nothing if it's not about statistics. Danny O'Connell was born in 1929. There were 2.1 million American males born in 1929. Of that number, 93 made it to the big leagues for even just one game. And O'Connell played for 10 years. And so I got to thinking he might be considered a common player in the parlance of baseball cards and the baseball game, but he certainly wasn't average. And as I got down the rabbit hole with his life, I found it fascinating. And so this book is sort of a tribute to the average ball player.
Yeah, and when you think about baseball cards, I'm a collector, or used to be a collector myself, and as I said, my cards are no longer relevant because they're in the 80s and the steroids, so they tell me it's not worth too much. But I know a little something about collecting cards, and when you see a guy's card traditionally over and over again, the worth of the card is really in the exclusivity of it. So when you see it more, it's kind of like the other way around. So was that something that intrigued you, like seeing him over and over and over again?
Yeah, because I was a San Francisco Giants fan. I'd take my allowance and I'd run up to the store and I'd buy my cards. I'd be looking for Willie Mays or Orlando Cepeda or some star giant. And every card I would get, every pack I would open would have a Danny O'Connell card in it. I didn't know who the heck Danny O'Connell was, and by the end of that season, I got to where I hated the guy. So yeah, you're right, and I think you were a collector. You probably had some player that every time you opened a pack, you saw the same face, and you didn't know who the guy was, and you didn't want him. Well, what I found was there's a good story behind each of those cards, and in O'Connell's case, it was a good story for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, I looked and I saw I got a Pete Rose card. I don't know if how much it'll ever be now, but shout out to Pete Rose, one of the greatest of all time in baseball history. And when you look at Danny O'Connell, you see people such as Pete Rose and other great ball players that we see today. Um, there's this vast difference, but then there's this one commonality, and that's that their lives. You have to live out life. And what made Danny O'Connell's life so special? It wasn't great in terms of being an athlete, but he had a special life.
Yeah, he sort of mirrored what's now called the golden age of baseball. He was born in the Depression, grew up in Patterson, New Jersey, and from the time he was 6 years old, he wanted to be a baseball player. And he achieved his dream. He did it the hard way. He spent 5 years in the minors, finally got to the majors, had a great rookie year, and then he got drafted and was in the Korean War for 2 years. And he came back and he played the rest of the decade of the 1950s baseball. So he lived his dream, which is basically to play baseball for a living.
And when you look at baseball players today, obviously, a lot of money's out there, and a lot of publicity is out there. Wasn't the same back then. So, what was it like, pretty much from a Danny O'Connell perspective?
Well, during the season, he was a star. He got his name in the newspapers. He traveled, stayed in nice hotels. The season ended, and most players in those days didn't make enough money to live off their baseball salary. So in O'Connell's case, the season ended, and he took a job. Sometimes he worked for the post office. Sometimes he worked for UPS. Sometimes he worked for a beer distributorship and gave speeches to different dinners and things. And then spring training came, and he dropped that life and went back to playing baseball for the season.
And when we talk about how you came upon him, again, through the life of a baseball card. Talking to you, I feel this commonality, right? Because I was a card collector. I know you were a card collector. You've had cards. Talk to us about this because there's this world and there's this connection that stems between people in the baseball card industry.
Yeah, it's funny. That's a great point because I was my little league prowess peaked at the age of 11. I think that's when I reached as good as I was ever going to be as a player. I love baseball, and baseball cards gave you that link with the game. Uh, and I think that's been true since baseball cards were invented, and it's true today for a lot of kids. And so I know talking to people around the country, somebody's always got if they collected baseball cards, they've got a baseball card story. It's either a player they really loved or a player that they couldn't stand and they got all the time, or how they almost got a collection complete in sixth grade or high school. And in my case, I have no excuse. I gave them to the gift store. So
Yeah. And when we look at baseball as we know it right now, obviously a lot of major league talent out there. I'm gonna talk about the Mets for a minute again. I know we're in the Yankee town, so just go with the underdog for a minute because the Mets are in the playoffs. But I look at a guy like Sterling Marte, and I think he's a great ball player. However, I understand that Sterling didn't start right there in the big leagues. He came through the minor leagues, and the minor leagues being a backdoor for not even a backdoor, but a backdoor and also a front door for so many big league players where the talent is actually cultivated there.
right. Yeah, that's a good example because there's a guy who made it because Marte. I mean, because he can play a lot of positions. He can do a lot of things on the team, and he helps the team in a lot of different ways. And that's the type of player O'Connell was. He was not a star by any means, but he could do a little bit of everything from pitch batting practice to play every infield position. So that's what kept him in the big leagues for 10 years. And there's a lot of players like that today. There's stars on every team, but most of the players are guys who play a role and know what they need to do to help win.
Yeah. An interesting quote that I saw on the front of the book came from Bob Costas, and I'll read it for somebody who doesn't have the book. It says, being an average Major League Baseball player means that you're a better ball player than 99% of all those who ever swung a bat. And it just may mean that your story is much richer than the average stat suggests. And you find that with Danny O'Connell.
Yeah, I think so because O'Connell's worth to the team went well beyond the statistics. He was really well loved by his teammates on all the teams he played for. Even the opposing players liked him because he had a great sense of humor. He tried hard all the time. He played the game right. He hustled all the time, but he wasn't an angry player and he wasn't a team player. And even the umpires liked him. So, if you go to work every day and your coworkers like you, and the people on the other companies like you, and the guys who are the bosses like you, then you must be a pretty good guy.
Yeah. So, Steve, now did Bob Costas actually know about Danny O'Connell, or did you have to give him the background?
No, he knew about being a New York guy. He knew about Danny O'Connell because O'Connell grew up in New Jersey, played with the New York Giants before they moved to San Francisco. Was an arch rival of the Dodgers when they were in Brooklyn. So I'm sure Bob knew who Danny O'Connell was.
Yeah, yeah. So as we think about baseball right now, obviously it's October, and we know here in the Bronx, Reggie Jackson was always known as Mr. October. And I think about where we are baseball-wise, the fact of where we've come, and really the identity that it has in sports, and so many people are attracted and attached to baseball. What has baseball as a sport meant to you?
Yeah, to me, growing up when I did in the 50s and early 60s, my youth, football hadn't come around as much. Basketball wasn't a big deal, particularly. Baseball was truly America's sport. And as you said before about collecting baseball cards and how you and I, we never met, but we have a kinship because we both collected cards. I think the game, you're in New York, I'm here in Arizona. We can talk baseball. We can talk about, how the Mets are going to do against the Brewers. They're going to continue. Are they going to do those comeback things like they did yesterday against the Braves? And that's something that people can relate to, and put aside any differences you have otherwise and talk about the game. And I think that's true in other sports too, but baseball has such a long history in America that I think it has a unique role.
Yeah. Well, since I got you here, I might as well put you to good use here and talk about what do you see happening in the rest of these playoffs.
You know what? I have a bad feeling. I have to confess, I'm a Giants fan, so I'm rooting for anybody but the Dodgers. But
Okay.
I got a bad feeling it's going to be the Yankees and the Dodgers again.
Really?
I wouldn't mind seeing the Mets. I wouldn't mind seeing the Phillies. I wouldn't mind seeing the Padres. And in the American League, the Tigers would be great because they've been gone for so long from the playoffs. But I have this feeling it's going to be an Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani show.
Yeah. And what has Otani meant for baseball? I mean, obviously, to see his stats and to see him play, he's really revitalized the game of baseball too.
Yeah, he's one of those guys, and Judge is the same way. That when you even care about baseball. My wife is not a baseball fan by any means, but if I have a game on, Ohtani comes up or Aaron Judge comes up, he stops and watches. And man, Ohtani's a beast. I mean, you think about what he's done this year as a hitter, and then he didn't even pitch. So who knows what's going to happen next year?
Isn't that crazy? I mean, the man didn't even pitch this year, and you look at the stats and you wonder where could it go. But
Yeah.
he's on fire, and we'll see. Steve, it's been great talking to you, brother. You got to come back and talk again.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Again, Steve's book is The Uncommon Life of Danny O'Connell. And Steve, if somebody wants to pick it up, where do they go?
You can pick it up anywhere you can buy a book. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, your local bookstore, just about any place you can buy a book.
Yeah.
If you don't have the money, go to the library and get it there.
All right. The Uncommon Life of Danny O'Connell, written by Steve Wiegand. And thanks so much, Steve, for sitting. You brighten my day talking baseball. And listen, I got to go, but I need to keep my viewers here. So I want to tell our viewers, don't go anywhere. We'll be back with more right after this.